And as I've reflected on this loss and this grief, I begin to realize, wow, very much like what you said, God used Lucy's presence to help me to move forward on my journey, to begin to believe this simple idea that if Lucy can choose me that unconditionally, then what is true is that God can choose me that unconditionally. Yeah. And if we allow the pets in our lives to be the theologians in our life and to ask the question, what might God be wanting to teach me about the divine through my relationship with my pet, whether I'm in recovery or not, it can be a significant part of our moving forward. I think that the pets in our lives do a great job of helping meet those 7 desires that Mark and Deb write about.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to the Faithful and True podcast. And once again, we have Jim. He is with me. And you will see that Randy is still not with us yet. He is out on a vacation with his wife, and we're very glad that he is able to do that, and we miss his presence as we gather. I have to own that today's topic is kind of a self-indulgence. I'm the one that came up with it. It's something that is significant for me and also for my family, for Beth. And today what we're going to be talking about is one of the parts of our recovery team that I don't think that we often talk about. And this comes about from my own experience and my own story. And for those of you that have been to the Faithful and True workshops, either for the men or the women, you know that one of the things that we believe is it's important that you develop a recovery team. And that recovery team is there to support you, guide you, lead you. Now, you're the leader of that team, and the members of the team are there to support you on your journey. Well, one of the aspects of the recovery team that I don't think that we've ever talked, I know that I've not talked about it in a podcast. I allude to it sometimes at the workshop. But one of the things we're going to be talking about today is the role of our pets on our recovery team. And this comes from my own story. Beth and I, in our recovery journey, and we've been in recovery for 18 years, have had 2 dogs. And each of those dogs, though very different, have played a significant role in our recovery journey. They truly were a presence of grace and hope and meaning. And recently, within the last couple of weeks, our dog Lucy died. We had to put her down. And so I've just been very aware of the significant role that pets play in our recovery. So whether you love dogs or love cats, we know that they can be significant. And so we're just going to take some time to talk about what is the role of pets on our recovery team and how can they support us on our journey.
Yeah, I'm excited, Greg. I absolutely love dogs. And sorry about your Lucy. I didn't know that.
Yeah, thank you.
So sorry about that, because they are meaningful. I've had to put 2 dogs down, and that's a pretty significant grief that comes with doing that.
You know, one of the messages that we've been given in this process, because what happened with Lucy is one day, in fact, we were here at the couples workshop, and we got a word from our pet sitter that Lucy just wasn't herself. And we had used this pet sitter for years. And so she had a understanding, a relationship with who Lucy was. And so when she said Lucy's not herself, we were concerned. And we were getting ready to go on another trip after the couples workshop. So we took her to an emergency hospital. It was a Sunday. They were open. We were able to take her. And that really began our journey of understanding that the end was near. That because of some masses that she had, some growth that she had in her abdomen, that really she wasn't going to last much longer. And it was so disorienting. It was just so shocking because we just thought that maybe she had eaten something. And so to get that news, and so for all of our listeners who have been in that situation where they got that news that their pet isn't doing well. And one of the things that I was introduced to is this idea that the nature of animals is that God instinctively created in them an understanding of when the end was coming. Mm-hmm. And so if they were dying from a disease or old age, they would naturally kind of select and leave the herd, leave the pack, go by themselves, and then die in isolation. Well, because we have domesticated them, we kind of taken that away from them. And so we are now the keepers, we are the stewards of that experience for them. And one of the messages that we got from the doctors and the various people that were a part of this process is we are tempted to hold on to them for ourselves. And it takes incredible compassion and wisdom and discernment to know it's important to release them. Yeah. And one of the things that Beth and I talked about is we were so thankful that it was very clear on the day that we decided to put Lucy down. It was very clear that this was the day that it needed to happen. She was in many ways communicating that to us. And one of the things that the vet said to us when we brought Lucy in was that our animals, cats and our dogs, are very good at keeping that information from us, that they want to protect us. One of the things that brought us comfort, though, is, again, several of the vets said, Lucy in this moment doesn't know that she is this sick. Now, she knows she doesn't feel well, but she doesn't have this information that we have. And so in this moment, she just doesn't feel well, but she doesn't know that the end is near. And that information was a great gift to us. Beth and I canceled the plans that we had. We went on a doggy vacation. It was the first time that we'd ever done that, only because Lucy was not a good traveler. But on this trip, it was just meaningful for us to be together. And so it's very easy sometimes for those of us who do love our pets to think, wow, I'm overreacting in the loss of my pet. But it's amazing, as I've reflected, the significant role that Lucy and our other dog, Winston, played in this recovery journey.
Yeah. Well, I just think of, our own pets, the times, like we have 3 boys, and times when they've had, a rough game in sports or a rough day in school, and, our golden retriever's there, and, they're laying their head on him or even laying on him, and he's just, allowing it to happen and loving on him. And it's just that, that sense of that unconditional love and unconditional presence, no matter, like we talked about in an earlier podcast, no matter what we're feeling or how we're feeling, that dog or that cat in some people's experience is present for you, available for you, loves you unconditionally.
Right. And I want to expand it. We are talking about pets, we're talking about dogs and cats, but we also know that for people, it can be a variety of different animals. Horses, we know, have a significant intuitive aspect of them. In fact, that's where the whole idea of equine therapy comes from. Many counseling centers have their own recovery or therapy dogs that are part of that. Many people have animals that provide emotional support. And I think part of the thing that is so significant is I do believe that animals have this intuitive knowing that something is off. Yeah. Part of our story is, our life exploded, and at that time, Beth and I did not have an animal. We didn't have a dog. And I had kind of in my arrogance, or I don't know what it was, but it wasn't in my wise adult. In my survivor, that's probably a way to say it, Beth would say that she wanted a dog. And one of the things that I would say, well, if you're going to get a dog, you're going to have to get a new husband. That was a mistake. I shouldn't have said that. But what ended up happening was when we were separated, Beth and the boys went and got Winston. And so Winston became a significant part of our family at the very beginning of our recovery. In fact, I wasn't even in the home when Beth got Winston. And I was smart enough to know that if I'm going to find my way back in the home, Winston had to agree. I had to get Winston's vote. So even though we were separated, I started being intentional to be the one that would feed Winston when I was visiting the house or take Winston for a walk. And one of the things, eventually, obviously, I did move back in. I did get Winston's blessing. I was accepted back in. But one of the things that we often talked about is Winston intuitively knew when someone was having a bad day. And Beth would tell the story of early in recovery when life was so difficult, when there was so much chaos, so much pain. There was this green chair that she would sit in, and Winston would either just come and sit at her feet or maybe crawl up in her lap. But Winston would show up in a very tangible way to be present with Beth. And I do think very much what you're saying, whether it's a bad game or a fight with our spouse or just the grief and sadness that comes with addiction and recovery, there are those animals that intuitively will just be with us in that.
Yeah.
And, we talked before we started the podcast about this idea of God reveals God's truth through animals. And it was just a very clear reminder of I'm not alone. That through Winston's presence, I am reminded that there is community, that there is a divine presence, that this is one of God's creation. And if Winston can be attuned to what's going on in my life, I can absolutely trust that God is also.
Yeah. I think that's exactly true. And and they meet some very legitimate, very practical needs. I often think about, like when maybe, when a person's in a separation, a redemptive separation,
Right.
or, if you've lost a spouse, what do pets do is they give you that touch that, kind of becomes pretty evident when you've lost someone or you're in a separation, that I don't have that human physical connection.
Right. Well, and one of the things that is true is when we are in a difficult place with our spouse, and there is anger, there is tension, there is grief, there is sadness, there is distance, an animal can kind of cross over and be with us in a way that our spouse can't be with us, or we're not ready to receive our spouse. For a while, Winston could get much closer physically to Beth than I could. Winston got to sit right next to Beth on the couch. There were times when I didn't get to sit right next to Beth on the couch because of Beth's grief and sadness and what I had done. It made perfect sense. And for me as the spouse watching it, it was actually comforting for me to know that Winston could be present in Beth's life in a way that I couldn't as she was in her own journey of healing. There was a season when we had Winston. Our boys were in school, and our younger son got home like just 5 minutes before Beth did. He'd get off the bus, come to the house, Beth would meet him, and typically there was like a 5-minute delay. Before we got Winston, typically he would just sit on the front porch and wait for Beth to get home. He didn't want to go into the home by himself. Once we had Winston, he never waited on the porch again because there was somebody there waiting for him, greeting him, welcoming him in. And then the same thing was true for Beth. When she got home, Winston was there to greet and welcome. One of the great things about our animals is they're always glad we're there.
Yeah.
They welcome us, We had Winston, and then we also adopted Lucy. They're both rescue dogs, and they always were glad that we were there. Even Winston, who could be standoffish, would greet you, welcome you, and then go find his place in the sunshine. Lucy was there with you, wanted to be right up against you. And it was just this amazing thing of being pursued by an animal.
Yeah, and their presence. I mean, when we do the men's workshop, I often hear stories, when we do the small group day about, guys that, would be home alone quite often, but they would have that pet, they'd have that dog, that was so meaningful that, it kind of eased a lot of that loneliness, that they weren't completely alone.
Right. And it also, for a couple that's going through a difficult season, gives them a safe expression of love, a safe director, a place to direct their love. We may not be ready to move back towards our spouse yet, but maybe it's going on walks with the dog, Maybe it's playing with the dog in the back or having the cat come and curl up on your lap. But there are some ways that we can create a sense of safety, and maybe that animal is actually a buffer between us and the spouse, but we can create a connection to our spouse vicariously because we're both connected to the pet that's in our life.
Yeah. I think, even when things aren't, or when things are going well, it's a great connection point. I often talk about, we have a golden retriever, and he loves to go paddleboarding with my wife and I. The hard part is he I don't have as good as balance as Marlo does. So when he jumps off my paddleboard, I end up in the lake.
Right.
But it's a fun experience that brings Marlo and I together. We'll bring him to the lake paddleboarding, and he loves to get, on each of our paddleboards, and it's just really a great point of connection for the two of us.
Yeah. One of the things is that in a lot of people's homes in the early days of recovery, there's just a heaviness. And so to have this animal that is playful and light just reminds us that, yes, it doesn't take us away from our situation. It doesn't rescue us. It doesn't immediately make things better. And it also reminds us that playfulness and lightness in our home may be possible again. And for those that maybe their relationships didn't make it, that the person struggling with addiction wasn't able to find his way in recovery, or the wife wasn't able to find the support that she needed in order to continue to move forward in the relationship, so they find themselves separated and then divorced. That animal can be just a loving presence in that profound grief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that I was trying to sort out, is there any research on the benefit of animals? And actually I found quite a bit. I found, well, there's, they actually increase your immunity.
Right.
Decrease stress. Obviously helps with emotional regulation. One of the things we all probably have heard, we probably even see movies about this, with the importance of pets with, PTSD, for example, when someone goes into, one of those responses, that a dog will bring you back to the present moment, keep you in the presence.
Right.
And so there's so many benefits that can come from a pet if, when you're in recovery, that just really kind of serves some pretty valuable tools or goals that we're trying to.
Well, and even the idea of self-soothing,
Yeah.
that if I'm activated, if I'm anxious, if I'm struggling, and my heart is racing, there is something very relaxing and soothing to pet my dog and rub the dog's ears, or scratch the cat, or have the cat curl up in my lap and be able to pet the cat's fur. There is a tactile experience in that allows me to begin to relax and be present. There's this attachment of life to life, that dopamine can be a part of that experience. And so, like you said, it's not just a practical thing, but there's also the research that shows these animals on our recovery team can make a significant difference for us, as we're looking for a variety of different places of support.
Yeah. I'm glad that we had this. Just last week, I told Marlo, my wife, because we have this golden retriever, I said, I think Jesus actually gifted us this dog, because it seems like this is directly from heaven.
Right.
I actually called him an angel without wings.
Absolutely. And I think there is this personal connection that we have. Part of the thing about Lucy that was so true for me is, given some things that happened in my story, one of the things that I struggle with is this old core belief that I'm not choosable. And I've been doing a lot of work on that. I've used a variety of different modalities. And as we became aware of Lucy's condition, one of the things I began to realize is that part of the role that Lucy played in my life was this unconditional love and unconditional choosing of me. And Beth often joked about the fact that Lucy was my dog. If I was around, Lucy was going to seek me out. Yeah. And the joke was that, Beth was the second choice. I don't think that's always true. But what was obvious is that Lucy chose me. And as I've reflected on this, it's almost as if Lucy knew intuitively that that was part of my woundedness, and that Lucy could choose me in a way that I could receive. That there was no other agenda. There wasn't anything else going on. It wasn't that she wanted something from me. Now, at times she did want to be fed, but the reality was she just wanted to be with me. She chose me. And as I've reflected on this loss and this grief, I begin to realize, wow, very much like what you said, God used Lucy's presence to help me to move forward on my journey, to begin to believe this simple idea that if Lucy can choose me that unconditionally, then what is true is that God can choose me that unconditionally. Yeah. And if we allow the pets in our lives to be the theologians in our life, and to ask the question, what might God be wanting to teach me about the divine through my relationship with my pet, whether I'm in recovery or not, it can be a significant part of our moving forward. I think that the pets in our lives do a great job of helping meet those 7 desires that Mark and Deb write about.
Yeah, I think so. One of the things that I was just trying to sort out, because I hear this quite a bit. Do you think our pets are going to be in heaven? And so I just started just researching, what do people say about this? What are some of the theologians? And I want to read Billy Graham, because I read a couple things. C.S. Lewis had a comment that he believes his dog's going to be in
Right.
heaven. Martin Luther, the main guy that started off the Protestant movement.
Right.
He actually
These are not some lesser theologians that are
I'm
talking
not even
about
going to
that.
try to pronounce his dog's name because I was looking at it. I'm like, I don't even know how to pronounce that. But I want to read this from Billy Graham because it hit me, because most people are familiar with Billy
Right.
Graham. So Billy Graham, this is what he writes. He goes, I think God will have prepared everything for our perfect happiness. If it takes my dog being there in heaven, I believe he'll be there.
Mm-hmm. Now, maybe the question is, can there be a heaven without our pets?
Yeah.
That is part of the graciousness, the goodness, the redemption that God is able to offer, to be reminded of the divine.
Yeah.
And that God is with us. I mentioned this idea of looking for the 7 desires, and that idea of blessing. One of the things that Lucy provided was that unconditional love and acceptance. That no matter what I had done, no matter the choice that I had made, even if I had been in a grumpy mood, or I'd been hostile or angry, Lucy still pursued me. Yeah. And I love that idea of our pets being God's expression of blessing directed towards us. And it's the touch piece. It's the idea that we do have affection. We can snuggle with our dog or stroke our cat and pet and enjoy the feeling of that fur. We can also get that affirmation, whether it's through the licks on our faces or the snuggling that they do against us. So I believe the 7 desires can be found in this very significant way as we understand they are God's presence in our life.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great point, too, in terms of the touch, because, some of us haven't experienced safe touch, and so pets provide a healing around that, where they'll initiate touch in a safe way, and we can initiate touch back with them in a safe way without any expectations. Mm-hmm.
I want to, like you read a quote, I want to read a quote. This was sent to us. This was actually texted us, because a lot of people in our community know about Lucy. And this is what it says. Every single creature is full of God and is a book about God. Every creature is a word of God. If I spend enough time with the tiniest creature, even a caterpillar, I would never have to prepare a sermon. So full of God is every creature. And that came from Meister Eckhart.
Yeah.
So this idea of God's revelation through our pets, the role that they can play on our recovery team, I think is so significant. And there are many of you that are listening that may want to just speed through this podcast because maybe you're not a pet person. But for those of you that are, I would encourage you to really welcome the truth of God's presence through your pet. For those of you that have recently lost a pet, to give yourself permission to grieve that. It's interesting, ironic, divine. Within the last couple of weeks in losing Lucy, I've had 2 conversations with men in recovery about the loss of their own pet and how painful it is to be the one that has to determine that the end has come and that it's time to put them down. So for those of you that have ever faced that decision, to be aware of the significance and even the gift of death that you gave your pet versus there being suffering. And then for those of you that maybe are open, maybe you are in recovery and there have been some challenges in your recovery. And if you're in a relationship and you're married and there can be a conversation about maybe this is something we can be open to. Or if you're single and you are wanting to expand your recovery team, I think Jim and I would say that the pets that we've had have been a significant part of that. Mm-hmm. And again, allowing that pet to serve as God's presence in our life.
Yeah. I love dogs. I wish I'd actually met Lucy now that you've talked about her so much.
Yeah, she was amazing. And for those of you that have been to the workshop, again, she's one of the illustrations I use in my teaching, and that will continue. Even in her absence, she and Winston continue to be a part of our recovery.
Yeah. I've been trying to talk Randy and allowing our golden retriever Maximus here, but he hasn't agreed to clean up after him outside, so I'm waiting for him to agree. Then Maximus might be around more.
Maybe that's your commitment that you will do the
cleaning.
That
might be true. It's my way of messing around with Randy a little bit.
Yeah.
And he's not here to defend himself.
That's right. So. Well, we can just make that decision in his absence.
Exactly.
Well, again, thank you for tuning in to the Faithful and True podcast. Again, Jim, it's been great to have this conversation with you. If If you're new to Faithful and True, I encourage you to seek out our website, faithfulandtrue.com. We have information about the workshops that we do and just a variety of different resources. These podcasts have been going on for years, and so all of them are archived. So if you're interested in listening to more of them, you can explore through all of the ones that we have saved. And we are glad that maybe one day we can be a support of your recovery and be a part of your team. So again, we want to encourage you as you go on the journey of becoming the person that God created you to be.